Good morning, everyone. Today we are examining Isaiah chapter 40 and looking at some lessons from this particular chapter. And there is a lot that we could talk about, and we could spend easily 45 minutes or an hour just going over some of the basics that are found in this particular chapter. We're not going to do that this morning, but we could, because there are a lot of very interesting and very good points to be made from this chapter. I'm going to very briefly go over 4 points, 4 lessons that I think are important and valuable for us to learn coming out of Isaiah chapter 40. The first one is found in verses 3 through 5. This is a prophetic statement that is going to be made about the coming of John the baptizer and later Jesus. When you have verse 3, the statement, the voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be exalted, and every mountain and hill brought low. The crooked places shall be made straight, and the rough places smooth. The glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. And you're going to see this verse, especially verse number 3, being quoted in various of the gospel accounts in the introduction of John, the forerunner, the voice of one crying in the wilderness. And so those particular statements that are used as a descriptor of John are coming from Isaiah chapter 40, verses 3 through 5. And verse 5 there, he talks about the glory of the Lord shall be revealed. Well, Jesus was the glory of the Lord. All flesh shall see it together, and the mouth of the Lord has spoken. The glory of the Lord was revealed with the coming of the Lord and the one who prepared the way for him. The second thing I want us to learn, I want us to notice from chapter 40, comes with verses 12 through 14. There are a series of questions, and they are rhetorical questions that are going to be asked in this particular section of verses. Who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand, measured heaven with a span, and calculated the dust of the earth in a measure? Who has weighed the mountains in scales and the hills in a balance? Who has directed the Spirit of the Lord, or as his counselor has taught him? And with whom did he take counsel, and who instructed him and taught him in the path of justice? Who taught him knowledge and showed him the way of understanding? These questions sound very similar to the questions that God is going to ask Job back in the book of Job, in the latter sections of that book, about who he is and a reminder of what it is that he does and what it is that he can do that is beyond anything that anybody else has the ability to understand or to tell him or to teach him. And that's exactly what you see being emphasized here. These rhetorical questions are of a nature of saying, listen, what can you do that God cannot? Or what do you know that God cannot? And these are the emphases of this particular section. The value of them, or the purpose of them, is to help to remind us that we are not smarter than God. We are not wiser than God. We are not the teachers of God. We are the ones who are supposed to be taught by God and listening to what he has to say instead of feeling as though we are greater and smarter than he is. It also denotes the majesty of God and the greatness of God being lauded and extolled to his people. And so we see those things in those verses. And then you come down to another emphasis of the majesty of God, beginning in verse number 18, where there he says, to whom then will you liken God? Or what likeness will you compare to him? And then he's going to talk about those that try with various ways or by various means to make a picture of God, which, by the way, was against the old law. It was against the standards that God had set, that there were supposed to be no graven images of him of any kind. And part of the reason for that is nobody knows what God looks like in a literal sense. There is no likeness that you can use to compare to him. There are no images that you can make that will be suitable or that will satisfy the nature of who he is or what he is, because as John will talk about in John chapter 4, God is a spirit. But yet when people try to prepare a physical image of a spiritual God, they fail. And it winds up being something that they idolize in the literal sense instead of something that is done for the purpose of bringing God higher in their own eyes. Instead, God is brought lower because they worship the thing that they have created instead of the Creator that made him. And so you have these questions in verses 18 through 20 about how you would do these things or why you would do these things. And then in verse 21 he says, have you not known? Have you not heard? Has it not been told to you from the beginning? Have you not understood from the foundations of the earth that he who sits above the circle of the earth and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them out like a tent to dwell in? He's not one for pictures. He's greater than that. He's bigger than that. And you can't do anything that does justice to the manifestation of who he is that is greater than anything he has already made. And you can only use those things he has already made. Final point to be made. In verses 27 through 31, you have a very well-known passage of Scripture, and especially in verses 29 through 31, you have the message of he gives power to the weak, and to those who have no might he increases strength. Even youths shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. We know these particular verses very well. They're on posters, they're in songs, there's all kinds of different things about these verses. But I want to make sure we understand them in the context in which they are being presented by Isaiah. Because in the context, going back up to verse 27, Isaiah says, why do you say, O Jacob, and speak, O Israel, my way is hidden from the Lord, and my just claim is passed over by God? So in other words, why do you say God doesn't care? God isn't listening. God isn't paying attention. God does not see my plight. God does not hear my prayer. God doesn't know what's going on. He says, have you not known? Have you not heard? The everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, neither faints nor is weary. He hasn't gone to sleep. He hasn't stopped paying attention. He hasn't just automatically said, you know what, I don't care about you anymore, or I don't want to talk to you anymore, or I'm sick of dealing with all of your petty problems. Instead, it is a matter of the fact that his understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the weak, and to those who have no might he increases strength. While others faint and grow weary, while others utterly fall, it won't be the case for those who wait on the Lord. See, the problem oftentimes is not in the fact that God isn't listening to us, or that God has forgotten, or God has stopped hearing us, or doesn't care about us. It's a matter of we want things on our timetable. And we're the ones who get tired. We get tired of waiting on God. We get tired of waiting for God to take care of the issue. We get tired of being on our knees. And instead, we want action now. But we have to be those who wait on the Lord. And it's not always easy. It's not always comfortable. And it's certainly not always on our timetable. But that's what we have to do when it comes to our relationship with God. Sometimes we have to wait. Those are some of the things that I have pulled out from chapter 40, and I hope that they are things that are beneficial to you. Next time, we will examine Isaiah chapter 41. I hope that you have a great day.